Welcome back to another video from Jesus Christ Prison Ministry. This video is on Daniel chapter 11, part 1, the Great War. To begin Daniel chapter 11, we will slide back to Daniel chapter 10, verse 21. I'll inform you about what has been recorded in the book of truth. Gabriel is about to show Daniel the great and horrible war that will take place between good and evil to the end of time. The starting point is very clear. As we have already shared in previous videos, God does not leave us floundering in space, wondering where to start and end with the prophecies He has given us. In Daniel chapter 10, verse 1, we read, "In the 3rd year of Cyrus, the king of Persia, a message came to Daniel from God, and it was explained in a vision. The message was about a horrible war, and it was true." In Daniel 11:2, we read, "Now I'll tell you the truth. Look, 3 more kings will arise in Persia." Again, keep in mind that the books of the Bible were written without any chapters or verses. Chapters and verses were added since the 13th century. Therefore, close study will show that Daniel chapter 11, verse 2 is actually continuing after Daniel chapter 10, verse 1. The rest of the verses in between are simply fillers. The 3 kings to arise after Cyrus are Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus the Great, who reigned from 530 to 522 BC. The next king was Smerdis, who was the younger son of Cyrus the Great, ruled while his older brother, Cambyses II, was at war in Egypt. Cambyses became envious of his brother and had him killed quietly. According to some accounts, the people did not know of the death of Smerdis, and an impostor proclaiming himself as Smerdis stepped in as king. As Cambyses was headed back to his capital to unseat the impostor Smerdis, Cambyses too died. Darius I, who was the lance bearer to Cambyses II, killed Smerdis and took control of the empire from 521 to 486 BC. Continuing, we read, "Then a 4th will gain more than them all. As soon as he gains power by means of his wealth, he'll stir up everyone against the Grecian kingdoms." This 4th king is known in the Bible as King Xerxes. To understand his wealth, read the 1st chapter of Esther. He had great wealth. The problem was, he just couldn't sit and enjoy his wealth and power. He had conquered most of the then-known world and was not satisfied. He wanted more. Coveting will always get you into trouble. He went after Greece, and that became the downfall of the Persian Empire. The concept of stirring up everyone against the Grecian kingdoms has 2 interesting meanings, kind of a play on words. It can mean, and in fact actually did take place, that Xerxes did stir up or bring together about 40 different nations in order to attack Greece. However, the other meaning is, he shall rouse all the realm of Greece, and that he did. Prior to the invasion of Xerxes, Greece was a loosely knit federation of city-states that worked more against each other than they did with each other. But after the invasions of Xerxes, the city-states of Greece pulled together and became a force to be reckoned with, not only by what Alexander the Great, who is mentioned in Daniel chapter 11 verse 3 as a mighty king will come to power, but what Greece did with all modern Europe and civilization. Think of it like this. If the Persians had won against Greece, how changed would be history? Instead of a world of democracy, we probably would be ruled by kings and dictatorships as the Persian Empire was. Continuing, we read, "His kingdom will be broken and parceled out in all directions. It will not go to his succeeding descendants, nor will its power match how he ruled, because his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to successors besides them." The kingdom of Alexander the Great, as you have learned in the previous lessons of our Daniel and Revelation video series, was broken and parceled out in all directions. It did not go to his descendants, but was taken over by 4 of his generals. And what they controlled did not match what Alexander conquered and ruled. Why? Because instead of working together as a unit for the good of Greece, they fought each other and weakened the great Grecian Empire. So far, the Bible is perfect in all its prophecies. From this point until verse 17, we will be dealing with the kings of the north and the kings of the south. During this time, the northern kings will be the kings of the Seleucids, and the southern kings will be the Ptolemaic kings of Egypt. Why are these 2 kingdoms mentioned? As stated in many of our videos, God is basically only concerned with his people and what affects them. Since the wicked have rejected God, God is only involved in the wicked as they get involved with God's people. Since the land of Israel lay between the kingdoms of the north, that which was the old Babylonian and Persian kingdoms, and the kingdom of the south, Egypt, their wars definitely impacted God's people in the middle, Israel. Why? Well, both kingdoms wanted Syria. Therefore, for almost 200 years, these 2 kingdoms were marching through the land of Israel to fight each other. Daniel chapter 11, verse 5. "The king of the south will grow powerful. Then one of his generals will rebel and take over most of the kingdom." Alexander conquered Egypt and made it a strong nation as part of his kingdom. After he died, Ptolemy I, who was one of Alexander's most trusted generals and among the 7 bodyguards attached to his person, took the title Pharaoh in 305 to 304 BC and ruled Egypt, thus founding the Ptolemaic kingdom or dynasty. Daniel 11, verse 6. Years later, the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom will make a treaty, and the daughter of the king of the south will marry the king of the north. But she will lose her power. Then she, her husband, their child, and the servants who came with her will all be killed. Over the years, the kings of the Seleucids and the Ptolemies fought and fought and fought. But then they decided to make a treaty, and the daughter of the Ptolemies, the southern kingdom, married the king of the Seleucids, the northern kingdom. This was to ensure political stability. That stability never happened. How did this come about? Antiochus II came to power while the wars between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies were raging. While attempting to gain a foothold in Thrace, he killed the tyrant Timarchus. The citizens were extremely thankful and gave Antiochus II the title Theos, which means in Greek, God. Getting tired of war with the Ptolemies, he made a peace treaty with Ptolemy II by marrying Bernice, the daughter of Ptolemy. However, in order to marry Bernice, Antiochus II repudiated his wife, Laodice I, and sent her away to live in Ephesus. Later, Laodice I started a movement conspiring to reassert herself as queen once more. Finally, the moment came. She poisoned Antiochus, while her partisans murdered Bernice and their infant son. So ends verse 5. As you can see, modern TV sitcoms and daytime soap operas are just a continuation of the sinful human condition. Today's intrigues are no different after 2,300 years. Daniel 11, verses 7 and 8. One of her relatives will become the ruler of the southern kingdom. He will attack the army of the northern kingdom and capture its fortresses. Then he will carry their idols to Egypt, together with their precious treasures of silver and gold. But it will be a long time before he attacks the northern kingdom again. As you can imagine, the death of Bernice and her son was not appreciated by her brother Ptolemy III, who was now the ruler of Egypt. He invaded the Seleucid Empire and received the submission of the Seleucid Empire's eastern provinces, while his Egyptian fleets attacked the coast of Asia Minor. In other words, the prophecy states that he took their precious treasures. This was done by receiving submission of the Seleucids' eastern provinces. This increased his wealth. Daniel 11, verses 9 through 11. The king of the north will invade the southern kingdom, but he will be forced back to his own country. The sons of the king of the north will gather a huge army that will sweep down like a roaring flood, reaching all the way to the fortress of the southern kingdom. But this will make the king of the south angry, and he will defeat this large army from the north. Antiochus III, the Great, became king at the age of 18. However, there was still much infighting and disorganization in his kingdom. Instead of first getting control of his kingdom, he went on an attack against the Ptolemies. It was a disaster, and he retreated back to his own country. The sons of the king of the north refers to the sons of Antiochus II, Seleucid II, and Antiochus III, the Great. In succession, they both returned and attempted to defeat the Ptolemy Empire. However, at the Battle of Raphia, which is near the Palestine-Egyptian border, Ptolemy IV defeated Antiochus. Daniel 11, verses 12 and 13. The king of the south will feel proud because of the many thousands he has killed, but his victories won't last long because the king of the north will gather a large and more powerful army than ever before. Then in a few years, he will start invading other countries. Ptolemy IV felt proud of his defeat of Antiochus III. After all, according to the leading ancient historian of this period, Polybius, Ptolemy inflicted on Antiochus 10,000 infantry and 300 cavalry deaths and took 4,000 prisoners. But instead of strengthening his position, Ptolemy got involved with internal problems. In order to defeat Antiochus, Ptolemy had recruited, armed, and trained Egyptians. Because of this training and equipping, the Egyptian population felt strong enough to revolt against the Greek Ptolemies. Upper Egypt seceded. Ptolemy and his queen died mysteriously and were succeeded by Ptolemy V, Epiphanes. Back to the northern kingdom. Antiochus also had internal problems of his own and had to spend a few years invading other countries that were in the process of breaking away from his rule. In 216 BC, Antiochus' army marched into western Anatolia to suppress the local rebellion led by his own cousin. Then they spread out to the outlying provinces of the north and east of Anatolia. In 209 BC, Antiochus invaded northeastern Iran. Daniel 11:14. At this time, many of your own people will try to make this vision come true by rebelling against the king of the south. But their rebellion will fail. Keep in mind The visions of Daniel are related to the sanctuary. To refresh your memory, be sure to watch our Daniel 8 and 9 videos. Okay, in Daniel 11, verse 14, we are told that his own people would try to make or force the vision of the sanctuary come true. They themselves would attempt to cleanse, purify, and sanctify the temple of God. How sad that they refused to wait upon God and let God bring about his own salvation and cleansing of his temple. Remember Daniel 9, how the Jews were to spend the 490 years bringing in everlasting righteousness. Remember how they were to put an end to sin and prepare for the coming Messiah? Well, instead of waiting upon God, the Jews were now taking matters into their own hands and beginning to rise up against the Greeks, who are now interfering with the Jewish religion. They forgot the Reformation that was started and strengthened by Ezra and Nehemiah. They taught the people to get their hearts right with God and be obedient to God. Ezra and Nehemiah instructed them not to get involved with other nations. Like most of us in our churches today, instead of rising up against our own sins and developing within ourselves the perfect, righteous, and sinless life of God, which he demands of us, how often we are pointing out and fighting against other people's sins. I have found that the churches of today are no different than the street gangs. One gang fighting against another gang, never stopping to realize that just belonging to a gang is wrong. To allow others to control you and tell you what to do is of the devil. We are to give our lives and service to Jesus and Jesus only, not to a church or gang. Keep in mind, the Greek or Hellenistic kingdoms of the north and south had been tramping through Israel for almost 200 years up to this time. Also, keep in mind, after being rebuilt, the temple at Jerusalem at this time was only about 300 years old. The Jews were very touchy when it came to their new temple. How sad that so soon after recommitting themselves to God after their return from the Babylonian captivity, they lost sight of God. Instead of trusting in God and developing the faith of looking to God, they took matters into their own hands. How like our churches today. Our churches become our gods, and we fight and defend them like the pagans fight and defend their idols, and the Jews their temple. When Antiochus IV became ruler of the Seleucid Empire, he looked upon the high priest of the Jews as nothing more than a local governor who could be removed and politically appointed. However, to the Orthodox Jew, the high priest was divinely appointed. It was the conflict between those two opinions that started this whole mess. It was also what started the mindset in the Jews that would lead to the rejection of Jesus as the Messiah. The Jews of Christ's day were looking for a Savior to free them from the earthly empires. Jason, the brother of the high priest, bribed Antiochus to make him high priest instead of his brother. Jason was attempting to bring Greek Hellenizing culture to the Jews, much like those who are attempting to bring the world into the churches of today. Antiochus probably would have never even noticed the Jews if Jason had not brought the attention of the Jews to Antiochus. Same within the churches of the modern era. If they had kept out of politics and concentrated on changing their own lives, we would not be in the mess we are today with the religious right getting involved with government. That involvement will be the downfall of the Christian church. Now the government feels justified in getting involved in church politics. How often we bring upon us our own troubles by trying to make a name for ourselves, instead of waiting on God to raise us up on His own and in His own time. Instead of living the perfect, righteous, and sinless life, We want to make laws to put on a show of righteousness while our lives are living in sin. Jason attempted to do away with the traditional theocracy of the Jews and tried to institute a Greek polis, or city-state. That is when the murderous intrigues began. Murders and insurrections followed between the Hellenizers and the Orthodox Jews. These insurrections and revolts pulled in Antiochus IV, who sacked Jerusalem and looted the temple. The temple sacrifices were forbidden. Sabbaths and feasts were banned. Circumcision was outlawed. Greek gods were set up, and an idol of the Olympian Zeus was placed on the altar of the temple. Possession of the Torah carried a capital offense. Judas Maccabee became the leader of the Orthodox Jews in revolt against the Seleucid Empire. He used guerrilla warfare against the Seleucids and eventually struck a deal with the empire that restored religious freedom to the Jews. The Jewish festival of Hanukkah celebrates the rededication of the temple following the Maccabean victory. But again, this is a man-made festival and is not sanctioned by God. Remember what Jesus said in Mark 7:6 and 7? And he said to them, "Well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites. As it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men." The rise of the Pharisees and Sadducees can be traced directly to the involvement of the Jews in the revolts against the Seleucid Empire and among themselves. The Sadducees claimed a direct descent and lineage from Zadok and divine right to the priesthood. They were from the wealthy and the elite. The Pharisees were more democratic and believed that through study and education of the Torah, one could attain to the priesthood. They were of the lower classes of people, the less wealthy. Remember, Paul was a Pharisee. They were the more pious and against the Hellenistic influences of Greek culture into Jewish life. The Jews of today come directly from the Pharisee traditions and beliefs. The Sadducees seem to have withered out with very few references to them after the destruction of the temple in AD 70. And so today, the churches are doing the very same thing, setting up traditions and commandments of men that are not sanctioned or authorized by God. Daniel 11, verse 15. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount, and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. Antiochus III the Great, after the death of Ptolemy IV, launched another campaign against the southern kingdom. In 198 BC, in the Battle of Paneum, all the Ptolemy holdings from the Palestine-Egyptian border north were taken by Antiochus III. The Ptolemy kingdom was never able to regain that control as prophesied. As the vision stated, Antiochus would cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities. This is exactly what he did. He took the major fenced cities along the coast, such as Gaza and Sidon. However, the decisive battle took place at Paneum. This is today near Paneas, or what in the Bible was called Caesarea Philippi. This city was near Mount Hermon. Again, another play on words. Cast up a mount, mount meaning a siege, but also at the foot of Mount Hermon. The prophecy also stated that his chosen people would not be able to withstand the northern kingdom. How true. However, the term northern kingdom will now migrate from the Seleucids' kingdom to the Roman Empire. The Ptolemies of Egypt will continue to be the southern kingdom. Daniel 11, verse 16. However, the one who invades him will do whatever he wants to do. No one will oppose him. He'll establish himself in the beautiful land, wielding devastating power. Yes, he did. Rome invaded, and Rome did whatever he wanted to do. And he did establish himself in the beautiful land, which is Palestine or Israel. Daniel 11:17. He'll decide to come with the full power of his kingdom, bringing with him an alliance that he'll implement. He'll give him a daughter in marriage to overthrow it, but it won't succeed or work out for him. Finally, it was time to put an end to the Ptolemaic Empire. The Ptolemies became so riddled with corruption, intermarriage, coups, family murders, and dynastic quarrels that it became a liability to the stability of Rome. Egypt was a major supplier of food for Rome. This is how it came about. Ptolemy 12 saw the rise of the Roman Empire. City after city was falling to the Macedonian and Seleucid Empire. The Ptolemies decided to ally themselves with Rome. This pact lasted about 150 years. Ptolemy 12 paid tribute to Rome in order to keep Rome out of its territory, but Rome kept tightening the noose. Eventually, his daughter, Cleopatra, became mistress of Caesar, which continued the so-called independence of the Ptolemy dynasty. But as the Bible prophesied and stated, that didn't work. Rome, under Octavian, eventually claimed Egypt as a Roman province. Keep in mind, God is allowing all of this to work out for his purpose. The whole world needed to be under one controlling government and one language that could be understood by all in order for Jesus to be heard around the world. Everything that is taking place is for one purpose, to prepare the world for the coming Messiah. Daniel 11, verse 18. Then he'll turn his attention to the coastal lands and will capture many. But a commander will put an end to his insolence, repaying him for his scorn. After Caesar absorbed Egypt into the Roman Empire, he continued his conquest and wars up the western coast of Africa, conquering coastal cities along Libya, Tunisia, and Algeria. Eventually, his conquests took him to Spain. Now Rome ruled everything around the Mediterranean Sea. But a commander will put an end to his insolence, repaying him for his scorn. Caesar made a most famous boast after defeating Pharnacus, who was the king of Bosporus. He said, as translated into English, "I came, I saw, I conquered." Caesar was boastful and insolent. Caesar likened himself to Alexander the Great. Daniel 11, verse 19. He'll turn his attention toward the fortresses in his own territory, but he'll stumble and fall and won't endure. There was a conspiracy in Rome to remove Caesar for fear that he would become an absolute king. As the prophecy says, a commander will put an end to his insolence. Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus stabbed Caesar at the foot of Pompey's statue. Addressing Brutus in Greek before he died, Caesar says, "Even you, lad?" He literally stumbled and fell after being stabbed. Daniel 11, verse 20. His successor will send out a tax collector for royal splendor, but in a short period of time he'll be shattered, though neither in anger nor in battle. The successor of Caesar was Gaius Octavius. In 27 BC, the Roman Senate voted him the official name of Imperator Caesar Augustus. Augustus means the Exalted. In 12 BC, the Senate bestowed on him the title Pontifex Maximus, or High Priest and Head of the Roman State Religion. Keep that in mind because that's very important. In 2 BC, he received the title Father of his Country. If you are following along here, you can see the devil attempting to usurp the coming Messiah. If the Jews were looking for a Messiah to conquer and be the head of their religion, the devil was ready to give them one. Imperator Caesar Augustus. It was Augustus who sent out the decree to take the census that is recorded in Luke chapter 2, verse 1. This decree resulted in Mary and Joseph traveling to Bethlehem for the birth of Jesus, the Messiah. Emmanuel, the name given to Jesus in the Old Testament, means God with us. Truly, Jesus is the true exalted one. Remember what we learned about days in prophecy? They actually mean years. Well, the prophecy said that he would die a few days after the issuing of the census, but not in anger or battle. Sure enough, about 16 years after the census, Caesar Augustus died quietly in his sleep from an illness. Daniel 11, verse 21. And in his place shall stand up a contemptible person, in whom they had not given the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in time of security, and shall obtain the kingdom by flatteries. The term shall stand up is interesting because Tiberius, who succeeded Augustus, was not in line to be king. He was adopted, and only after the grandsons of Augustus died was he considered as a successor. Therefore, he was not in line for succession or had not been given the honor of the kingdom. He did come to the kingdom in time of security, or in other words, peaceably. He ascended the throne without a fight or intrigue. History seems to indicate that Tiberius became paranoid and obsessed with treason. Many were accused, tried, and executed for treason. The Romans became obsessed with their hatred of Tiberius. So yes, in the eyes of the Romans, Tiberius was contemptible. Daniel 11, verse 22. Armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. According to history, Tiberius was one of the greatest generals of Rome. He fought and won many battles that expanded and secured the frontier borders of the Roman Empire. So yes, he did utterly sweep away many armies that stood before him, including the Prince of the Covenant. This Prince of the Covenant was Jesus Christ. It was Tiberius who appointed Pontius Pilate as the 5th Roman procurator of Judea by Tiberius. It was during the reign of Tiberius that the Romans and the Jews collaborated together under Pontius Pilate to sweep the Prince of the Covenant away. By their collaboration, Jesus was nailed to the cross and rejected. Daniel 11, verse 23. And from the time that an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, and he shall become strong with a small people. With this verse, a change takes place. A change so profound that it is easy to miss. We will end this video at this verse. We will continue in our video on Daniel 11, part 2. Join us as we continue this video series. God bless you as you live in obedience to Jesus Christ.